Welcome in, everybody. This will be season 6, episode number 41 of the Outlap F1 podcast. It's the 2024 Mexico City. Don't call it the Mexican Grand Prix because they don't like that, but it's Mexico City Grand Prix review show. You've got Andy, and I am along with Cody tonight. And we just, not very long ago, actually, just wrapped up the Mexican GP. In fact, I think as I'm talking, the actual official decision by the FIA to actually certify the race. I don't think that's quite been handled yet, but we think we know enough to actually get the recording in. But Cody, how's it going on a actually pretty nice Sunday for October in Chicago?
Yeah, it's been a really nice weekend. Got out, enjoyed some Halloween festivities, came back, and we're in the section of the F1 calendar right now where it's actually easy watching as an American. Everything is like at a comfortable time of day. I don't have to get up at the crack of dawn or stay up until the wee hours of the morning.
Yeah, that's all coming for us at the last race of the season. So Abu Dhabi is going to do that to us and do that to us in spades, possibly, especially given what plans we just made. But we'll leave that. We'll tease that for now and get into that a little later. But that's not why you're all here. You're here because we got a race to review, and this was a pretty good one. For sometimes Mexico City can kind of be a bit of a snoozer. This one was anything but a snoozer. So we got lots of good stuff to get into, and we're going to do that in just a little bit. But if you have found our show, welcome along. If you can find us, as always, Twitter or X, whatever the platform is. We're still there. We still put stuff out. We do it all the time. Instagram, Discord, Reddit, and, of course, YouTube. At Outlap F1 Podcast is the handle for all of that. If you are liking what you're seeing and you enjoy what you're hearing, you can do as the kids do and smash the subscribe button, or you can leave us a like. Or if you're on your favorite podcasting app, specifically Apple Podcasts or Spotify, if you want to leave us a 5-star review, that we'd be most appreciative of that, number one. And two, what does that do? It helps us get our content to you a little bit quicker, helps us come up a little bit better in search results. You can email the show, as always, chatnow@outlapf1.com. We'll take you there. Thank you so much to the people who do continue to support the show, including Dean Warwick, Yuri Dolchester, Paul Weaver, Quentin Warden, Kevin Kelly, Regan Stanzik, Timothy Brown, and, of course, Jonathan Scott. If you'd like to become a member of what we call the hashtag Outlap F1 Nation, you can see our anchor page, $1, $5. All goes into a couple things, either upgrading equipment we already have to stay relevant, or buying some new equipment so we can do some new and cool stuff moving forward. If you'd like to help us out with that, we would be most appreciative of that. Last thing before we get into the Mexican GP, the good folks at Manscaped, you can use our code OUTLAP, that's OUTLAP, and take advantage of 20% off and free shipping. As always, we are proud to bring that offer to you. Okay. We shall start with the headline of the day. Cody, what you got here?
All right. My headline of the day is inspired by one of my favorite TV shows, and it is, "He can't keep getting away with it," said the stewards. Finally had some negative repercussions from the stewards for Max Verstappen, and I think that at this time they were well-deserved, and we're going to get into that in a few minutes. But also, great show from Carlos Sainz. He's talking about how he's got some mixed feelings about the performance of the Ferrari going up just as his time with them is ending. But I think he is showing some of his best here on his way out. And I think he had a great time in Mexico City today.
Yeah, my headline is a similar vein to yours. And mine is, "You ride that rule book until she bucks you, Max." And today it finally bit back. And boy, did it bite back. And also, congratulations to Carlos Sainz if this does end up being his last win for a bit. And that's not to say that he might not have a couple more before the end of the season, the form that he's on. What a way to go out, because that was about as dominant of a weekend as I've seen from Carlos Sainz basically almost ever. From the first practice all the way through the qualifying, all the way through the race, this was his to lose, and lose it he did not. So he went and did everything he needed to do. It was a great drive by his part. So well on you, Carlos Sainz. I've seen a lot of people saying, boy, it kind of sucks that he has to leave. But, that's the way that goes. But we don't control that, unfortunately. But as we are apt to do, we're going to start with the qualifying recap. And I was a moron, and I did not do the thing that I should have done. So we're going to wait a minute here, and I'm going to talk stupidly until I find it. All right, here we go. All right, there we go. Oh, it's all weird speed, too. All right, so going out in P20, those were the kick salvers, the only one kick salver, Zhao Guan Yu. P19 was Esteban Ocon. P18, really, really painful weekend for these two overall. Sergio Perez in the Red Bull. And P17, Oscar Piastri in the McLaren. Ouch. We will talk about what happened to them. P16 was Franco Colapinto. P15 was Valtteri Bottas. P14 was Lance Stroll. P13 was Fernando Alonso. P12 was Liam Lawson. P11 was Yuki Tsunoda. P10 was Nico Hulkenberg. P9 was Alex Albon. P8 was Pierre Gasly in the Alpine. P7, Kevin Magnussen in the Haas. Continuing good form for them. P6, Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes. P5 is teammate George Russell in the other Mercedes. P4 was Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. P3, Lando Norris in the other McLaren. P2 was Max Verstappen. And P1, yeah, there he is with a lap time, 1:15.946. That was Carlos Sainz. All right. We got a bit of a mixed up grid here, Cody. Big thoughts here in the qualifying.
It was pretty painful, I think, for everyone who was watching and there at the race when Sergio Perez went out in Q1. You really want to see someone do good at their home Grand Prix. Even Sergio Perez, who has not been performing well for a little while now, I still wanted to see him bounce back and do well here in Mexico City. And he got off to a really rocky start with qualifying. Could not put it together with the car. Way down at the back, maybe a little less surprising than what we saw out of Lewis Hamilton last time out, but still not a good time for him. And then the one that was really surprising to me was Oscar Piastri, also going out in Q1. And if I remember correctly, he had a lap time deleted, right? And then
correct,
needed to try to, pretty much go for a safe lap around to try to put in at least some kind of actual time. And it was not well put together.
Yeah, I mean, he was fine through the first two sectors, and I kind of make the mistake of kind of relaxing because I'm like, the third sector is only like 19 seconds, and it's a turn, and you go around it, and it's the stadium section. There's you're going really slow, so the hard part of the lap you would think is over with at that point, but that is what caught Oscar Piastri out, specifically turn 12. He goes up onto the curb. He said he basically lost about a full second of lap time on that. And it was strange. I was surprised McLaren didn't originally box him because they both went out with enough time. But instead what he did was he tried to cool the tires and then go again. And they had also gone their first runs on mediums, because now the tire situation going into qualifying was a little bit different than what we normally would have had, because while we did have traditional FP1, FP2, FP3, the FP2 session was turned into specifically a Pirelli tire test. So you saw a lot more guys using up some of the softer tires in the one practice that they could use it, and then a lot in FP3. It seemed like that was almost qualifying practice as you were. So normally you don't see two sets being ran in FP3, but you did here. So a lot of teams were already kind of a set down, and to try to make up for that, McLaren, I know Mercedes did it, Ferrari did it. It seemed like a lot of the heavy hitters were all going out on mediums the first run. First run, okay, but not great. But, then the track ramped up. Everybody else was going out on soft tires. And look, this field is very tight from P1 to P20. Does not take much for you to get caught out. He has a lap time deleted. He tries to go around, cool the tire, go around again. He did improve a little bit on that second attempt eventually, but it was too late. Track amped up. Everybody else was on fresher tires. So he goes out after being P1 in FP3. So that was a shocker for sure, especially given the form he had shown. And I thought up till that point, he was probably the better of the two McLaren drivers, if I'm being honest with you. But just one of those things that kind of happens. So, lesson learned, hopefully, for McLaren moving forward. They cannot afford, given where the constructors are now, to have that happen again. So that's was a surprise there. But, looking at the front, the three heavy hitters all went at it and were in just a couple of tenths, but Carlos Sainz coming out in pole position, actually improved on his second flying qualifying attempt in Q3. So it looked like the Ferraris were dialed in. It looked like they got the track temperature to come down enough to where they were really, really, really humming.
And Oscar Piastri was not the only one to have lap times deleted. In fact, I think track limits, especially from curb riding, was an issue for a lot of people. Max Verstappen put together a really good lap with 3 purple sectors in Q3, and then it ended up getting deleted on very fine margins, just barely going over the curb, ended up with all 4 tires off the track. So he had to go out and put together one lap with a lot of stress on because he didn't have any time at that time for Q1 with his lap time deleted. So he managed to go out there and put together something good enough for P2, but still almost 2 tenths down on Carlos Sainz, who seemed to just put it together perfectly at the end.
Yeah, and some other notable, with Perez and Piastri being in the back, that opens up a couple spots, and those were filled by Albon, Gasly, Magnussen, P9, P8, P7, all respectively. So, we've seen that battle for P6 in the constructors. That got very intense over the course of the weekend. Not being able to make it into Q3 were the 2 V-carbs and Yuki Tsunoda and Liam Lawson. So that was a bit of significance that will play out when we get to the race in just a little bit. So, there is fights up and down this grid, and nobody seems to want to give anybody an inch at this point. So, just very, very intense qualifying. I called it, I think in my group chat afterwards, I thought it was a qualifying of attrition. Like you just survived it because everybody was on it seems very much a knife edge. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now we will move into the Sunday race, and we shall start, as we are apt to do, with the back markers. So your non-classified finishers on the day were P20 Yuki Tsunoda, P19 was Alex Albon, which we will talk about. They got together on lap 1 and get the dreaded DNF. And then, it was his 400th Grand Prix weekend. That's a lot of Grand Prix weekends. But Fernando Alonso, apparently when he has a milestone, bad things happen, because I think he had a DNF on his 300th Grand Prix weekend as well. So he only makes 15 laps. Something ended up into his radiator, whether it was a tear-off or something like that. But he was unable to continue. They boxed him and retired the car, and that was the end of the day for him. But your classified finishers, and this is painful to say, Sergio Perez, the last runner on the day in his home Grand Prix, comes home P17. Whether you like Checo or you don't like Checo, that sucks. So that's painful. P16 was Liam Lawson. P15 and P14, the Kicksaubers, kind of close to points, but not really. Zhao Guanyu in P15 and Valtteri Bottas in P14. And Esteban Ocon closes out our back markers in P13 for Alpine. Cody, big talking points here in the back markers.
I think first thing is to talk about the non-classified finishers. So Yuki Tsunoda and Alex Albon's day was over even before they got to the first turn. Yuki Tsunoda trying to take a strong move on the outside going into, heading toward that first turn. He's on the outside of Albon. Albon is squeezing him pretty much almost off the track. And then Albon himself gets squeezed over by, I believe it was Gasly, preparing to go into that first turn, and just pretty much ended up with a sandwich situation. Albon was effectively sandwiched by Gasly and Tsunoda as Tsunoda was trying to go around him. They hit tires. Tsunoda spins all the way around 180 degrees and goes off the track, and he's toast right away. And then you see that Albon is done as well because his front left suspension was ruined. You could see the tire all wonky as he was trying to go around the track. So too bad for them. Two guys who are really trying to make a case for their race seats, I guess, at the moment. I mean, Alex Albon isn't at risk of losing his at the moment, but he is up against Franco Colapinto, the new challenger, who is looking very good lately. So not a great time for Alex Albon to have his race end before the first lap is over. And then Yuki Tsunoda trying to make every case that he can to end up in that second Red Bull seat. And so not a good time for him as well. And I seem to remember he had a pretty bad time in Mexico City last year as well. So maybe this just isn't his track.
Yeah, you got to think so. I mean, it's a with the big run up to turn one. I think it's the longest from the start line to turn one that we have in all the tracks that F1 goes to. You knew something was going to happen. It's just a question of what and who gets caught out. And Yuki Tsunoda got caught out on this one and looked like a pretty actually spectacular wreck. But he was okay. That was the most important thing. We did now have 2 safety cars in 2 races because of that incident, but it's, I kind of read it as a 3 into 2, 3 cars going into a space that's really only meant for 2 cars. It doesn't fit. Somebody's going to get the brunt end of it. And unfortunately, Yuki Tsunoda did. So, no real way to kind of evaluate the rest of what he could have done in the race. We'll never find out because of that. But there's a lot of pressure on a lot of guys. And Alex Albon having bad results at a time when it doesn't look good. And Franco Colapinto continues to show real well. And, as we're going to talk about, he doesn't get any points here today, but, still, I think the pressure's now been ramped up at Williams, especially given who's coming into the seat. The guy who won the race today is coming into that other seat. And, a lot of talk about where is Franco Colapinto possibly going to go? Would he potentially go to Sauber? There was a rumor that popped up. Could he potentially end up in the Red Bull camp somehow? That seems to be pretty unfounded. They seem to be a lot more shutting of the door of that, at least from what I heard. But, lots of things still to be decided about, where people end up. And I still think Franco Colapinto ends up in a Williams reserve role. I think he'll be embedded in the team all year next year. And I think he's going to do F2. But then after that, it's a big decision because then both Sainz and Albon will be, having a shadow cast over them to either produce or might not be in a seat in 2026. You never know.
Someone else who had the pressure on them this weekend and it did not go anywhere was Sergio Perez, whose day just pretty much went all the worse after his poor qualifying. After that safety car incident, you see on the timing sheet that it looks like Sergio Perez has gone up like 5 places from the start. And you think, holy crap, he really had a hell of a start. And he did actually have a hell of a start where he drove very well. The only problem was everything was pretty much undone by the fact he was way too far forward in his grid box for the start. So he ended up getting a false start penalty for that, 5 seconds. Pretty sloppy, I would say, on that. He's a veteran driver for sure, so you'd think he'd be able to get into the grid box okay. But too far forward for sure. And then the day just continued to get worse. He ended up having some pretty tight battling with Liam Lawson, where they got a little too close to each other and ended up getting some bodywork damage to Sergio Perez's side pod. They did have some very choice words for each other over the radio, which is pretty funny to hear. Sergio Perez called Liam Lawson an idiot several times throughout the race, even when they weren't racing by each other. And then at the very end of the race, to try to keep the other teams from taking that fastest lap point, Red Bull decided that they were going to pit Sergio Perez for softs to try to go for that fastest lap, even though he wouldn't get the point, to deprive Ferrari and McLaren from getting it, and he couldn't even get that. So very unfortunate weekend for Sergio Perez.
Yeah, I mean, it's painful because he has so much support, and the Mexican fans absolutely adore the guy, and he's a nice guy. And you know, I saw some commentary where it was like, well, are we being too nice on Sergio? And because he's a nice guy and we all like him. But you got to look at it from a results-based business too, and you got to look at it from a Red Bull standpoint. And Red Bull need his effort so badly, and it's just nowheresville. And to not line up right in the grid box, like this is a guy who's done a lot of, not as many as Fernando Alonso Grand Prix level, but he's done hundreds of Grand Prix. You know, he knows what that marker is, and to miss it like that is such an own goal. And he did have a tremendous start, because I looked at it, I'm like, well, did they get him for jumping the start? No, he didn't jump the start. He was just not in the grid box when the lights went out, which is not anything that anybody other than him can control. So it's another weird occurrence for a guy who you would not expect to have that. And it just feels like, for whatever reason, he's defiant and thinking he's going to be back in Mexico City next year, and he very well might be. But it's got to get better, and it's got to get better fast. And I don't see it happening anymore. You know, you always used to kind of hold out hope. Well, maybe he finds it. Maybe if nowhere else, he would find it here in front of his home crowd. And when that doesn't happen, you know, you just have to sit back and go, my gosh, could someone else be doing better? Could replacement level driver at this point actually be a better option for a team that, as we're going to look at the points, when we get to the constructor points, desperately needs him to be up there. And the fact that he wasn't this weekend is a big deal.
Agreed.
All right. Well, no offense to Zhao, Valtteri, or Esteban, but they had relatively quiet races. So we'll leave them there. And so we will now transition into the midfield. And P12 saw Franco Colapinto. He did actually end up with a time penalty as well. We'll talk about that. P11 was Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin. Slightly better form from qualifying, but not good enough to quite get in the points. P10, making up for not getting the points at Austin, Pierre Gasly in the Alpine. And the pleasant surprise of this last stretch, the Haas's. P9, Nico Hulkenberg, 2 big points for them. The rallying McLaren of Oscar Piastri does make it from P17 to P8, so he gets some points there. And then the other Haas, P7, Kevin Magnussen, who I thought had a great drive and showed some really good pace late in front of a hard-charging Oscar Piastri, who was really looking to get past him as quickly as he could, but he held him off. So that was good to see if you're a Haas fan, for sure. P6, we have to talk about the fun day of one Max Verstappen and his runnings into with his championship rival, as well as running into with the stewards. P5 and P4, boy, did these two have an intra-team battle. Talk about a long-standing battle, and it actually, both guys got through it clean. I kept thinking there's going to be a point at which somebody's going to touch somebody and it's going to go really bad, but proof that you can actually race each other hard, clean, and fair. George Russell in P5 and Lewis Hamilton, who stayed patient and got it done in the end, in P4. All right, Cody, big thoughts here in the midfield.
Oh, do we want to start with the Max Verstappen stuff?
I'm gonna say we do the Max Verstappen stuff with the podium.
All right. Well, we will do that then. In that case, I guess we'll go to the Mercedes fight. George Russell gets ahead of Lewis Hamilton fairly early on in the race. I would say I don't remember exactly when it happened, but I think it was within the first 20 laps. George Russell makes past Lewis Hamilton and manages to keep that spot for a good chunk of the race. He ends up with some sort of damage to his front wing at some point where they're showing on the camera that it's kind of flopping around a little bit, but it wasn't really too bad. It didn't really seem to be affecting the performance of the car too much. But as we got later into the race, Lewis Hamilton was definitely making a charge for George Russell, and it was one of those just couldn't quite get there for many laps. Lewis was in George Russell's DRS. Every time they went around, he would make some good gains on him down that front stretch. Wasn't getting close enough to him to really make a move, though, into turn one. So he tried to line it up through the rest of the lap so that he could make another go down the front stretch again. Just couldn't get there for lap after lap after lap. And finally, getting toward the end of the race, he finally ended up with enough on George where he was able to make a good move at the end of that front stretch. And I think at that point, George Russell kind of knew that the gig was up, that he wasn't going to be able to hold off Lewis anymore. And he pretty much looked like he just let Lewis by at that point, which I think was probably for the best. They don't want to take each other out and let Max get all the way up to P4. But it was really good racing between the two of them, good competition. They were pretty much out there on their own. They were never going to catch up to, the top three because, I think when Lando was running in third place, he was like 30 seconds ahead of the Mercedes. And they themselves were pretty far ahead of Max. So as long as they didn't crash into each other, they were going to be fourth and fifth. The order was just up to them. And it was nice to see good, clean racing between the two of them.
Yeah, and the other thing, just to kind of put it into some perspective, George Russell had to revert to some prior spec of parts because he had another pretty heavy crash in I think it was FP2. I think it was during the tire test. Right. He was the one that crashed out. So Mercedes were running low on spare parts in the first place, and now we're running lower on them. But I had to revert back to I think like a Canada spec of floor or something like that. They said so. His car was not nearly as fine tuned as it could have been, and Lewis, and not to mention then he gets the front wing damage and Lewis, to his credit, man, he raced him about as clean as you could have possibly asked for. And it was a good long, I think it was a good like 10 lap or something fight that, Lewis would keep getting into DRS and George would put the car right in the right spot to just make it so that Lewis couldn't put the move off. So, yeah, I mean, it was, and Toto came on the radio and said, just keep it clean. And that's what they both did. So, again, I think fair play to Lewis, I thought he did a really nice job of pulling the move off eventually and staying patient enough to have it happen. Could easily have gotten frustrated, as we've seen some other people get with moves recently. So it was a good, hard, fair fight, and that was very good for them. Elsewhere in the midfield, again, you got to give it to the two Haas guys. Double points yet again. Better double points even than in Austin, with Magnussen coming home in P7 and Hulkenberg coming home in P9. They've now opened up a gap in their P6 constructors battle, and it's a remote chance, but they're only 40 points away from Aston Martin when we get to that table. So, they're very confident, and they were even saying, we're going to target the Aston Martins. So now you've got another fight. Here is a team that I said, Aston Martin's going to finish fifth. You can lock that in. And I've been saying that for weeks and weeks and weeks. And damn if we're not going to have a fight for P5 in the constructors, if not P6. So who knows where that's going to end up.
Yeah, 40 points might be a bit of a mountain to overcome for them in 4 races, but it is really refreshing to see Haas performing well this late into the season. They are perennially known for maybe starting off well at the beginning of the year, and then they don't put in the investment to properly keep up with the upgrade race, so they tend to peter off as the season goes on. We haven't really seen that from them this year. They've been in the points consistently, race weekend after race weekend, and this time both of them in the points. So a really good haul for them. Kevin Magnussen in front out of the two. So fantastic weekend from him, continuing to show good stuff in sadly what may end up being his last year in Formula One. But yeah, just, great to see this from them, and I hope that they are able to take what they achieved this year and actually carry it into next year.
That would be amazing. And Magnussen, for his part, seems to be at peace with his fate, considering he was out of Formula One, and he literally said it, I think, in one of his post race interviews. I've already done this bit. I already knows what it's like to kind of have the send off and all that. So I'm just enjoying my time, and that's what he's doing. He's trying to do the best he can. And it's been also refreshing. We haven't seen angry K Mag. We haven't seen the guy who got the race ban come out. So yeah, I mean, if you're a Haas fan, a team that hasn't been able, as you said, Cody, to nail the upgrades. Looks like they're not only nailing the upgrades, it looks like they're actually trying to build something. And with Ollie Behrman going into that car next year, I think you're going to have to be marking Haas as seriously in the points. I think every weekend moving forward, and that is something very, very significant for that team. And they're going to get some extra money that they probably didn't ever anticipate having. So, what do they do with it? And and Io has been working more with less. Well, now that's just extra windfall, and where does that go? So, it's going to be interesting to watch for sure. But the Haas's gain, and here's another team that we hadn't given a lot of shine to. Alpine, Pierre Gasly makes it come home in P10, does get a point. That's big for them. This is 2 races in a row with some really nice qualifying for him. It really fell off in Austin. It didn't fall off as much here. It's good to see Gasly, bring it home a bit for the Alpine guys there as well. All right, so we're going to just kind of lump Max in with the podium because it's all kind of intertwined. So our podium saw Charles Leclerc come home in P3. Lando Norris does pick up the P2 after Charles Leclerc had what I thought for sure was going to be a wreck. I saw that and I went, oh, and I almost said a bad word. And then he saved it. So Charles Leclerc comes home in P3 after saving it late in the race. Lando comes home in P2, so he actually does pull some points back on his championship rival. And Carlos Sainz, what else can you say, man? He was out in front basically the whole race. Didn't have to be on TV a lot because guess what? He was by himself. But he did have to fight a little bit at the beginning. We'll talk a little bit about that. But Carlos Sainz comes home with the win. Like I said before, if this is his last win in a Ferrari, and it very well may not be, but boy, if that's the way to go out, you're certainly going out on top, man. Woohoo! All right, so let's also talk about the Lando Max kerfuffle yet again. It seemed like these two just picked up pretty much right where they left off after Austin, almost in the same order and almost with the same exact types of moves, except this time the stewards were not going to have any of it. So, Cody, what'd you see and what's your take?
So, before the safety car occurred, Max did get ahead of Carlos Sainz on the race start, had that lead through the safety car period. After that was over, we saw really quickly that the Ferrari pace was going to be really good because I think they only went around 1 lap before Carlos Sainz decided he was going to make the move on Verstappen, who had some words for his team over the car settings. Apparently, he didn't have enough battery charge to last down the entire straight, which ended up making the move look pretty easy for Carlos Sainz. It got a little sloppy after the move was actually done because he went over the curbs a little rough, and I thought that maybe Max was going to get back by him. But that second DRS zone kicked in, and he held the move. And then Lando's going for the move as well early on Max. Max does the classic thing when he's on the inside where he pushes the driver on the outside, pretty much off the track. To be fair, this time Max did himself at least stay within track limits, but he did push Lando off. Lando I think he went over the grass a little bit, comes back out almost alongside Carlos Sainz, but in front of Max. And Max says, "No, I'm not having that." And a couple turns later, pulls a move which I thought was very reckless. He goes down the inside of Lando at a spot where he clearly had no intention to stay on the track. He guns it through. He goes way off track. He pushes Lando way off track, takes that space away from Lando, does not give it back. And like I said, that move was like reckless. Like, no way in hell he was going to stay within track limits for that one. And the stewards agreed. So they put him under investigation for both of those incidents, which occurred within a few turns of each other, and ended up giving him a 10-second penalty for each incident. Now, second incident, for sure, like, thought 10 seconds was totally warranted for that. He was never going to try to stay on track for that one. He was just making a point that he was going to get back by Lando by any means necessary. The first one was maybe a little more marginal, in my opinion, because we did see that move several times throughout the race, where the driver on the inside pushed the driver on the outside off, and they either came together or the driver on the outside ended up cutting through the grass there. And I don't believe anyone else really got a penalty for that, except maybe Frank. I don't exactly remember what the Franco Colapinto penalty was for. But it seemed like that move occurred several times throughout the race, and not everyone was getting the penalty for it. So it was maybe more marginal for that one, but I think there was enough there for him to warrant getting the penalty. So, I mean, if you look at my hat here, big Max fan. Thought he drove like a dick this race. Thought he's been driving like a dick for a few races, but this one, after that second move, I was like, I even sent you text messages being like, yeah, those are penalties. He's totally screwed.
Yeah, and it even when Martin Brundle is aghast at what he's watching, that's a guy that's seen a thing or two. And the first one I think was a lot closer. I saw that and I almost went, God damn it, Lando, you went to the outside again. It was literally what I said. But I was like, well, okay, he comes back on. I thought Lando might just actually give the position back. But Max didn't even give him the opportunity to do that, because we go from turn 4, which is the first incident, and then we go to turn 8, where, Max there was no chance in hell he pulls that move off. If Lando doesn't back out and do what he does, they're both in the wall, and their day is done right then and there. And it's at that point where you just got to go, okay, enough. Literally, it was like enough is enough. And I think the stewards, who, were already going to be in the spotlight about that kind of thing anyway. And, the spotlight about those types of moves was the big talking point going in. We knew that was going to be the case, especially in the early part of the weekend, of trying to figure out, what do we want to do? There is a supposedly supposed to be a meeting supposed to happen in Qatar, where they're going to meet with the FIA is going to meet with the drivers and try to draft a better version of these engagement rules to try to see what they're going to do. Now, I heard some things that said that it might be implemented for Qatar, but it might just be drafted, and we might not actually get finality until 2025, which would kind of suck, because we kind of really need more definition of what is and what isn't okay, because otherwise we end up looking and like, well, this looked like this pass here, and that one was okay, but this pass over here gets a penalty, and why isn't that one when they look like they're the same thing? So, again, it's the endless cycle of debate that we seem to be in when it comes to these rules of engagement in overtaking, and who's overtaking whom and when and all that other stuff. Oh, by the way, the McLarens did do a right of review on the penalty from Austin. That got rejected. We knew that, like I had said that right from the beginning. I said I was kind of shocked that they actually filed the paperwork. They didn't get the fine, which was kind of interesting. But that's what spawned this FIA discussion to say, look, we also realize that the right of review is a ridiculously high standard, and maybe we'll look at that in the future, something too, to where, like, if you are, that standard of new and substantial evidence is a big hurdle to overcome. And I didn't think McLaren were going to have the juice for it. I like the argument they tried to make, but it was, maybe if that was the initial ruling and you could have argued it then, which you couldn't have anyway, maybe you got something, but then there wasn't enough there. So I'm not surprised that they got it dismissed. But here we were again, but this time the stewards bit back, and it's a 10-second penalty for the turn 4. shoving Lando off, and it's a 10-second penalty for the turn 8, which was just, Cody, you said it right. Max just decided to make his car a missile. And I think he was probably in that moment okay with crashing both of them out. And at that point, you got to step in and you got to say enough's enough.
And you're right. He probably would have been okay taking both of them out, because the way that he seems to think about this is, if I crash both of us out, he doesn't gain any points on me. It's probably the way he thinks about it. So he's like,
right.
What do I have to lose if I crash us both out? Now, realistically, as we get further into what happened with everyone else in the race here, you could, in some way, make the argument that what he did actually did reduce the amount that Lando closed in on him by. Now, so that 20-second penalty, when he came in for his pit stop, he was in the pit box forever and ended up losing positions to the Mercedes as well. He fought back up to sixth place by the end of the race, but wasn't going to really make any gains on the Mercedes. He only ended up with one 10-second penalty. He may have been able to stay in front of the Mercedes and therefore, maybe finished up in fourth, got more points for himself. However, part of this whole exchange was he did end up in front of Lando, and he did not give that place back, and he held up Lando all the way up until he took his pit stop. And as we saw later in the race, had Max not been holding up Lando for that whole stint, it might have been possible for Lando to actually win this race, because he had excellent pace in that McLaren that we saw getting toward the end. So, Carlos Sainz looked pretty much in control for most of this race. And for the vast majority of it, it was Carlos probably like 6 to 8 seconds out in front of Charles Leclerc, who was holding his own against Lando once Max pitted. But then as you get further into the race, get into the closing stages, Lando is closing the gap on Leclerc. And Carlos Sainz is coming over the radio pretty much saying like, hey, there's no need for Leclerc to try to catch up to me. He's pulling the politics, being like, hey, I don't want to have to fight him. Let's just go home like this. He got the win for the 1-2 last time. Maybe let me have this one. But it looked like Leclerc was closing that gap because he didn't really have a choice, because Lando was catching up to him. And eventually that pressure got too much. Leclerc maybe overdrove, coming out of that last turn onto the front straight just a little too much, trying to hold off Lando, and he really loses the car. Big whip around off the track into the dirt. The barrier of the track kind of like goes out at that portion, so he at least had that saving grace that there wasn't the wall as close as before for him to run into, but he did go into the dirt. Pretty much had to use that as like a launch strip to get back onto the track. But by that point, Lando was long gone. It was amazing that he made the save and managed to bring it home for the podium still. That said, once Lando got by him, we did see the gap continue to close up on Carlos all the way up until the end of the race. So it does make you wonder, had things happened a little differently, had Lando been in front of Max for that stint, maybe he could have actually gotten the win. But as it turns out, Carlos gets a fantastic win where he got pole and win and led practically the whole race. So as you said earlier, one of his most dominant performances that we've seen from Carlos. And Ferrari comes out of this with another double podium, which means that they are now past Red Bull in the constructors and are closing in on McLaren for the lead, which is going to make this really interesting heading into the last few races of the season here, because we have still kind of a battle going on for the drivers' championship between Max and Lando, and then you've got the constructors' battle between Ferrari and McLaren.
Yeah, the drivers, all of that falls out to the drivers coming down to a 47-point delta. And the ironic part is Carlos Sainz is now mathematically eliminated in the drivers despite winning the race today. So it's either going to be your driver's champion is going to be Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, or Charles Leclerc. And it's going to get harder. The math is just going to keep getting harder and harder for Leclerc moving forward. But to your point about that save, I thought that was it. I saw him go off. I saw it on timing, and I'm like, Lando's in that 0.1 second for a while, and I'm like, oh, are they fighting each other down the straightaway or something? And I go, and then all of a sudden Lando shoots up, and the gap gets really big, really fast, and I go, whoa, what happened? Did Charles maybe spin out or something? And then I saw it. You just see this cloud of dirt. And the overhead cam has it really well as to how close he got to the barrier. And if Ferrari do end up doing something in the constructors, that's the save that probably saved it, because you take 16 points away if Leclerc wrecks out there, and we're not talking about a constructors fight at this point. But we are, because Ferrari back up a 1-2 with a 1-3, which is really, really good for them. Lando probably does as much damage limitation in terms of the constructors as he could have done. It was a tale of two different tire compounds. The medium compound didn't work that great for the McLarens, worked really well for the Ferraris. The hard compound, you flip the script. McLaren found pace on the hard compound tire. The Ferraris couldn't find the pace on the hard compound tire, but they had built up enough of a gap. At least the Sainz gap was enough. I mean, he still wins by 4 seconds, but Lando basically runs out of laps basically at the end of it. So, you compound that with the move that Max makes. Could Lando maybe have won? Could we have seen a fight for P1? We'll never know. But it ended up working out to where I think everybody's kind of happy with the result that Carlos Sainz ends up winning. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I think Zach Brown actually photobombed the celebration, like what Fred Vasseur did when Lando won his first race in Miami. So it was kind of payback for that. So, all kind of at least still sporting at this point amongst those two. But those two teams are going to go at it now. You're going to watch McLaren and Ferrari marking each other up and down the grid. And that tells me, it's going to be the number twos now become really big. Carlos Sainz obviously pulling his weight. Oscar Piastri got to get back on the form as quickly as he can. Can't afford another bad qualifying. No more Q1 exits to the end of the season. So, with 4 races to go, all to play for in both championships still. And I think that's where we're going to leave it. All right, so we're going to take a quick break. We'll re-rack. We'll come on back. We'll detail out where the points are in terms of the drivers and the constructors. We do have some movement in both of those. And then we'll open it up to your thoughts on what you saw this weekend, the fan email segment. I love the fact that even though this race was pretty late on in the UK, people were still coming at us right away, which is awesome. And then we'll hand out our awards. We'll talk a little bit about predictions. That might be painful. We'll talk a little bit about predictions. And then we'll start to set the stage, because it's leg 2 of 3. Leg 3 is going to be on us really, really fast. The Brazilian Grand Prix awaits. We'll set the stage, the early stage for that. So come on back and we'll get into all of it. All right, welcome back in. This is season 6, episode number 41 of the Outlap F1 podcast. It's our 2024 Mexico City GP review show. You've got Andy and I'm along with Cody, and we just wrapped up an actually very drama-filled and very entertaining Mexico City Grand Prix. One of the better iterations of this race, I think, since they've gone back there. All right, so now where does this put? We're after round 21? I think we are around 20. Round 20. I think this is round 20. Where do all of the points shake out? So, Cody, I'll let you do the drivers, and I'll chime in with the team standings.
All right. In first place is still Max Verstappen for Red Bull at 362 points. Not the greatest haul for him this weekend. The gap does close up a little bit between him and Lando Norris, who is in second place with McLaren at 315 points. It is still going to be rough, but Lando still could make it happen. I think he's got to score something like 11 to 12 points better than Max for the next 4 race weekends to win the championship. It's going to be hard, but it's not impossible. In third place, really not too far behind at this point, is Charles Leclerc in third with Ferrari at 291 points. Oscar Piastri in fourth place in the other McLaren at 251 points. Carlos Sainz, really big haul of points this weekend. He is in fifth place with Ferrari at 240 points, so only 11 points behind Oscar Piastri at the moment. Sixth place, Lewis Hamilton in the first Mercedes at 189 points. George Russell behind him in seventh in the other Mercedes at 177 points. So still very competitive in the driver standings between the two Mercedes drivers. Eighth place, Sergio Perez, coming away with no points this weekend. He is in the other Red Bull at 150 points. And then that big gap down to Fernando Alonso in ninth place. Also not getting any points this weekend, which was unfortunate for his 400th Grand Prix weekend. He's driving for Aston Martin, and he's at 62 points. And then in 10th place, Nico Hulkenberg, holding on to that position for now, in Haas at 31 points.
All right. And our team standings have seen some shakeup with this round. But in P1, the gap is not what it once was, but it's still there. It's 29 points. McLaren, Mercedes, they have their lead eaten into a little bit by now P2 Ferrari, who have now overtaken Red Bull. So Ferrari are up to 537 points. That is a 29-point delta for P1 in the constructors. That fight is nowhere finished with 4 rounds to go. P3 now is Red Bull. They are up to 512 points. P4, this one I can call. Mercedes is going to finish P4. I don't think the math works for any other team, so the Mercedes will finish the constructors this year in P4. P5, we always thought this was pretty locked in. It's still Aston Martin. They are still on 86 points. But P6 Haas is now up to 46, so that's only 40 points away. It's a big ask. You never know in this sport, let's put it that way. So, but Haas definitely opened up a gap on the VCARB team, who only check in with 36 points as they do not score this weekend. P8, this battle is also far from done. Williams does currently maintain P8 with 17 points, but Alpine with Pierre Gasly's point is now up to 14 points, so that could also change before the end of the year. P10, it does look like this might be locked in, but it does feel like the Kicksauber is going to be, they maintain 0 points. They have not yet scored, so don't know if we're going to see all 10 teams scoring points this season, but one never knows. All right. So enough of our takes on what we saw for the Mexico City Grand Prix. It's now our time to open it up to your takes on what you saw. The fan email segment. We've got our regulars here. Cody, what do we have here?
Right. Our first fan email comes in from Rachel Fleming. Thank you, Rachel. And she says, so that was a million times better than last year's race. Then again, most races this year have been far better than last year's walkover from Max. I somewhat enjoyed the walkover from Max, though. But I must say that this year's races have been much more competitive and therefore generally more exciting. So, with regards to the Max versus Lando incident, maybe last week I was trying not to show any British bias, but not this week. I don't care if I start singing God Save the King, etc. 100% this is deserved for Max. That was pretty disgraceful, to be honest, from the Dutchman, and 20 seconds worth of penalties was absolutely deserved. I will 100% agree with you on that one, Rachel. As for Perez, well, what can you say? What is the point in keeping him in the car now? Red Bull are gaining nothing. Personally, Lawson should go in the seat for the last few races just to give Red Bull a chance at getting second place back in the constructors. Perez looks done in F1. He went out in Q1. He jumped the start and got a 5-second penalty, clashed with Lawson, damaged the car, and could barely get past Joe, which was a humiliating weekend. As for Sainz, he was on it all weekend, and he was my prediction to win this race. So you predicted very well, much better than me and Andy. 5 wins for Ferrari this season so far. Lewis Hamilton will be over the moon to be in that car for next season. Sauber watched this race. Bottas did a really good job this weekend, got into Q2 and finished ahead of a Red Bull. It was the Sergio Perez Red Bull, so I'm not really sure how much it counts. Shame it was only 13th. As for Joe, he kept Perez behind for a little while. And finally, Haas, especially K-Mag, have been really impressive this weekend. K-Mag finishing his F1 career with good form. And then she goes on to say, "Oh, my mistake. Ocon got Bottas at the end. Ocon is so done with Alpine." Yes, lots of good points here. Yes, definitely think Max deserved the penalties that he got. I don't even think you gotta go sing "God Save the King" to prove that one. I think most of the F1 world is going to be in agreement with you on that one, whether they're a Max fan or not. Perez definitely looks like he's going to be done, but he has managed to hold on to that seat this long, and he has been in this form for a long time now this season. So, he must feel pretty confident in that contract. If he hasn't lost the seat by now, I don't think he's going to lose it before the end of the season. Even though, it would be interesting to see Lawson get in that car and see what he can do. I'm more just waiting to see if we're going to see Perez back next season, because if they keep him in that Red Bull seat for next season, I think Red Bull has decided that the Sergio Perez fandom and merch sales and whatever they're getting from him, whatever money they're getting for him being in that seat, is more important than actually getting the most points that they can out of that second seat. At that point, they only care about Max. Let's see here. Go ahead.
No, I'll go. There has to be something I'm not seeing with the Sergio Perez situation. It's felt like that for a very long time. I was, quite honestly, very surprised that they said they were going to keep him after the summer break when it looked like he was done. He's had one good weekend since that, and that was Baku, and that ended in just a pile of tears, as it turned out, where he ended up not scoring any points anyway. And now Red Bull have lost P2 in the Constructors. They are more than likely going to finish P3 in the Constructors this season. And it is going to be because Max Verstappen is having to fight that basically one-handed in the constructor fight. He's one guy against four at this point, and there's only so much you can even ask as brilliant a driver as Max Verstappen is when he's on. That's too much to ask at this point, and he's getting no support from his teammates. So there has to be something that I am missing. I don't get it. I haven't understood it for a very long time. Red Bull obviously have a good stock of drivers. Liam Lawson has come in and has put his elbows out because he knows what he's got to do. And, whether or not this is more Red Bull infighting between the Helmut Marko faction and the Christian Horner faction, I don't know. But the Christian Horner faction is obviously still winning. So beyond that is the only thing I can really offer as to why Sergio is still in the car, is because Christian Horner and Max Verstappen want him there. For whatever reason, they want him there. And until that changes, Perez is going to continue to be there. I do think he's going to see out the rest of the season. I don't foresee V-carb or a swap or anything like that. That would be monumental, and it would be very unprecedented. And even for a team like Red Bull, who can pull a surprise out of anywhere, to do it with 4 races to go would be a shocker beyond belief. Let's put it that way. That would be an all caps tweet if that happens. Let's put it that way. But again, I fail to see the logic in why Perez is there, but he's there. So we'll continue to cover him while he's there. So, I think he's a great guy. He's a nice guy. He's got a hell of a fan base. And it was for a fan base that loves that guy so much, to have so nothing come out of it. It was just frustrating and painful. But, we talked about the Max versus Lando incidents. I think we're all in agreement that the penalties were correct in these cases. The first one may be a little more circumstantial than the second one, but the second one to me is a slam dunk. It could have even potentially been a drive-through, but I think when they decided to stack the two up, 20 seconds was probably enough. It definitely took Max out of contention for the win. All that being said, he still managed to come home in P6 on a car that he really didn't like. So, yeah, like I've said it many times, battling Max Verstappen is the equivalent of battling like Magnus Carlsen in chess. You don't just beat him or get up ahead of him. You got to beat him until he's dead. And then once after that, type of situation. So, he's just going to keep coming. And it doesn't sound like he's going to change his style of driving anytime soon. So it's going to be on the stewards. And in this case, the stewards bit back. And he's going to continue to do exactly those types of things. So I would expect more fireworks moving forward if he is behind Lando or now Charles or Carlos moving forward. I don't expect him to drive any different. In terms of Carlos Sainz, I totally agree. I think that this was a great victory for him. If this is the send-off, it's a great send-off. I hope Williams is actually going to turn their program around faster than we think. I think they're in the process of doing that. And a successful season for Sainz will be, if he somehow, some way scraps together a podium for Williams next year, that would be a hell of a development. So, and he definitely looks like he's got the tools to do that. He's driving great. It is kind of just what it is. And, with that type of situation, and you can't go back and undo a move that was made over almost a year ago now. So we knew that this was kind of going to be Carlos's awkward phase. So we're just going to kind of have to deal with it. And Haas,
if this is the awkward phase, he is making the best of the awkward phase.
Very much, very much. I mean, he could, and that's a testament to him and his character. He could have gotten all depressed about it and said, "Oh, this just wasn't fair," and come home P6 every race and would have seen out his time, and that would have been the end of it. But he is on tremendous form, and he's always had potential to have form like this. So, I wish him nothing but good things, and it was fun to watch. But and we talked earlier about Haas as well. That's really good to see a team that you didn't think was going to come out with upgrades and manage to put them together and to string upgrade packages together, which is something they've never been able to really do, is very, very significant, especially moving into next season.
Thank you again, Rachel, for your email. Our next one comes in from Dave Doherty. Thanks you, Dave. And he says, "Hi, team. Well, Sainz was outstanding in making the most of the seat in Ferrari. He's truly a smooth operator. When will Max Verstappen ever learn on racing? 20 seconds penalties. That is a surprise. Is it a surprise? No. As we said before, especially that second move was so outrageous that he was always going to get at least a penalty for that of some kind. Now, I think that awarding these penalties to him was a good thing, because it's going to hopefully rein in Max just a tiny bit and make it so that he doesn't go completely the way of a cornered animal in this championship. But I do think that part of why this happened, and indeed why a lot of the moves that we saw in this race happened, is because of the way that penalty situation was handled in the U.S. Grand Prix, where Max did not get a penalty for pushing Lando off the track, and Lando himself actually got the penalty for overtaking Max off the track. And what that seems to have shown a lot of the drivers, despite the fact that they did have a meeting talking about how they want some of the rules and ethics of, track overtakes looked at, we're kind of seeing, as of this race, that drivers are really now going for that needing to be at the front at the apex, and they are willing to brake later and perhaps be a little reckless to get ahead at that apex, and push other drivers off the track. We saw that move happen from a lot of different drivers during this race, not just Max. And I think that is a byproduct of what happened, last week at Coda. Now, also, as a result of what happened last week at Coda, that's just telling Max that maybe he can push that boundary even a little bit further, which is, I think, maybe why we saw that second move from him. But yeah, I don't know. I hope that he leaves this weekend and goes to Brazil thinking that, okay, that was a step too far. But then again, as I was saying before, in the end, you never really know exactly what would have happened. But in the end, he may have somehow still kept Lando from getting the maximum amount of points gained on him that he could this weekend. So maybe he's going to go into next weekend thinking that what he did was totally what is needed to win the championship, and we just see him continue to be nuts. I'm really not sure.
Yeah, I mean, to the comment of do you think Max is going to learn? My response is I wouldn't hold my breath on that one. Certainly, in all the post race stuff, he did not look like a driver who was being introspective or wanting to introspect at all. So I'm not holding my breath for that. I think you're going to see Max be the same guy he's always been until somebody makes it painful enough for him not to be that. And 20 seconds is a step in the right direction. But here's the big part. It's got to be consistent in how he's being called moving forward. It's great to have that here, but if you actually want to change the behavior, you got to put it into where it's not as beneficial for him to do that as it is for him to try it. So, we'll see. We're going to get a whole new set of stewards next week. It's a very different track with very different overtaking points. There's a lot more overtaking points. So, we're going to find out kind of how this next round kind of goes, and we're going to kind of see what the standard is. And the part that is frustrating, at least for all of us as fans, is it's a race to race thing. It's a week to week thing. We could have it be he's no further action on one, and then here he's got 20 seconds in penalties. So it's until there is clarity, we're going to continue to have it. But yeah, Dave, to your point about Carlos Sainz, again, very, very happy for him.
Yes, definitely a top-notch race from Carlos. Thank you, Dave, for your email. Our last one comes in from the Formula. Thank you, Mr. Formula. And he says, man, oh man, the more time goes on, the crazier it looks to fire Carlos Sainz. But it wouldn't be Ferrari without making a bad decision now, would it? Also, I feel like we have some more clarity on racing etiquettes now, which is good. Still some work to do. Yeah, we already pretty much covered that one, that maybe these penalties applied to Max will at least give a little bit of an indication of when too far is too far. And will it change much? It remains to be seen. It does. I always thought it kind of was going to look a little bad firing Carlos Sainz from Ferrari. I mean, we've said this before, though, too. The guy he's getting replaced with is Lewis Hamilton. Most wins ever in Formula One, tied for most championships ever in Formula One. It seems kind of like a bit of a no-brainer. At the very least, even if he is not performing at the peak of his abilities, which it looks like he still can, he's bringing in all that team support, all that fan support, merchandising, everything that goes along with that. I really think that since Lewis Hamilton was interested in that seat in the first place, that Carlos was always going to be screwed on that front. But he is definitely showing himself to be a top caliber driver, and that he is worthy of a seat at these top teams. And that even though he is taking some time away from those top teams, he's not leaving Formula One, which is something that we, at one time might have been a little bit afraid of. He is going to be in the Williams, which is actually looking to be a decent car, and the team seems to be on the up and up. So hopefully he'll still be able to show some good stuff at that team, and who knows, before you know it, he might be back in a top class seat competing for the championship again. So I think Carlos is doing everything that he needs to do. We saw it this weekend, the best that can be, and we'll just kind of have to see in the future how this decision pans out for Ferrari. But I don't think it's a bad decision. I don't think you could really call signing Lewis Hamilton a bad decision.
No. I mean, I think we get to the first or second race, and Lewis making a podium makes it all go away, and this is the unfortunate, awkward part of when you have to make a change like this. Carlos found a seat, so he's still going to be in F1. He's going to probably put all his energy into developing that Williams outfit. And if it works the way that you want, he will lift that team up, and they will be able to get at a much quicker rate of development than they would without him. That is all of this kind of working itself out. In terms of the racing etiquette, we kind of talked about that already. Again, I think it's what do we get moving forward? We got a definition here that seems to make a little more sense. But I can't tell you what the next round of stewards are going to do. In Brazil, we've seen some weird stuff happen with stewards before. So, that could be anywhere. But we are on the kind of this roller coaster ride on this F1 season. We're all just kind of riding along with it when it comes to, what comes out of race control at this point. So I don't really know what else to say about it, honestly.
You were talking about, Lewis Hamilton getting that podium at Ferrari and making all the bad feelings away. Like, screw that. First time Lewis Hamilton gets a win for Ferrari, everyone's going to lose their goddamn minds, and it'll be the coolest thing ever.
Well, I'm telling you, he wins the championship. They're going to be statues of him in Maranello.
Mm-hmm.
Bronze freaking statues in Ferrari gear, like he was always one of theirs.
Mm-hmm.
Quote me on it right now, and when I see it, you should put my name somewhere on it, F1 World, because I called it a year before he ever goes over there.
I am here for when it happens.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a thing, and like I said, you talk about a way to get a send off. My God. But anyway, so thank you everybody for your input. I always love the fan email segment. It's always a lot of fun to talk shop with all of you guys. You guys are great. Appreciate you guys chiming in as quickly and as often as you all do. All right, so we will move into our awards, and we shall start with the Rubbish Award. What goes in the bin this week? I think we have some consensus here. Cody, I'll let you go first. What you got?
I'm going to put Max Verstappen in the bin this weekend because his antics on the track were over the top. His 20 seconds worth of penalties were, in my opinion, well-deserved. It is somewhat amazing that he still managed to finish in sixth place and limit the damage. But that second move was bordering on being dangerous, and that type of behavior should be shut down. Perhaps even with a more severe penalty in the future if it continues. So, Max Payne for Max Verstappen.
Yeah, it was interesting. Post-race, they actually recalled one of the documents and gave him penalty points, which they originally, I think they forgot to do it, or they forgot to mention it. So it was a bit of post-race drama. All of a sudden, the document gets recalled, and everyone was like, well, what the hell does that mean? And it came back out where it was the same time penalty, but now with 2 penalty points on there. So I think he's up to 6. So not anywhere near a race ban or anything like that yet, but something to watch for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Mine is going to go both to Max Verstappen, because if that's not over the line, I really don't know what is over the line, especially the turn 8 one. I can get past the turn 4 one a little bit easier because, hey, that's 2 guys going for a thing. I understand that. That's kind of in the context of the race. But turn 8, you decided to turn your car into a freaking missile, and you were trying to take somebody out. And you were going to be damned, if you didn't. And if it wasn't for Lando's quick head, we might be talking about, no more championship or anything else. And maybe that's the way you wanted it. But that was over the line, and that's not cool. And I don't like that. No more, please. And my other one goes out to Christian Horner, who I don't know, Cody, if you saw some of the post-race stunt he tried to pull, where he, in front of a lot of reporters, had one of those telemetry reports and was like letting all the reporters take pictures of it to try to show that somehow Lando was kind of sort of at fault for some of this. This harkens back to Great Britain in 2021, when after Max got or after even the fact that Lewis Hamilton got a 10-second penalty in that race after Max got wrecked out, they put Sebastian Buemi, and they went out and rented Silverstone for a day and tried to simulate the wreck to show the FIA really how bad it really was and that they didn't take enough, sanction against Lewis Hamilton. And that's the type of stuff, that type of crap, I am not here for. I don't like stunts. And Christian Horner, you did a stunt, and you get out of here with that. So both of you is in the bin for that one. All right. So we'll move on to our analysis paralysis. I think we have consensus here too. Cody, I'll give you the honor. What you got?
I'm not exactly sure the best way to phrase this, but my analysis paralysis is kind of retroactively going back to the United States Grand Prix and that penalty situation between Verstappen and Lando, because as we said, we are continuing to feel the effects of that decision during this Grand Prix with, one, Max Verstappen continuing to push the boundaries on what is acceptable for on-track racing and ethics. And now we are even seeing those types of behaviors spread to the rest of the drivers on the track, with racing to the apex, being really late on the brakes, pushing drivers wide and off the track if they think that they can do that and get away with it. And what last week's penalty showed is that there's pretty good indication that you can get away with it. And, the stewards here at the Mexico City Grand Prix tried to kind of go back on that a little bit by being very harsh on Max. Like I said, I think that first penalty was kind of right on the edge of whether, it's kind of a coin toss on whether you say that's a penalty or not. But I think in this instance, it was good that penalty was given to him, because they really need to come down hard now on that type of racing, or it's just going to continue to get worse.
Yeah, I'm in a similar vein with you. For a one-stop race, you can't. What are you going to talk about with strategy? There really wasn't anything that I could do. So this one will go out to the FIA. And my theme on here is indecision breeds contempt on all sides. And that's exactly what happened. The fact that we had, the incident last week and there was no real resolution. And then McLaren do a right of review. And even though the right of review gets rejected, those stewards even then said, well, maybe we really should have a better mechanism to look at it. And, when you stay in the middle and you don't pick a side, like, it's either kind of one or the other. You can't have it both ways. And when you're trying to live in the middle with two guys going at it like this, everybody just hates it. And that's what you ended up basically happening, was all the drivers got pissed that this was going to happen. And now you're finally listening. So, I mean, I guess it's better than the alternative of they just say, well, these are the rules and all we're here to do is enforce the rules and blah, 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 blah. But, goddamn, you gotta do something. At least you did something today. That's a step in the right direction. Let's make sure that it happens again if it gets this bad again, because you can't have what almost happened today happen.
If that keeps happening with Max, he might actually miss a race before the end of the season, and that would throw any hopes he's got, I think.
Talk about throwing a monkey in his wrench there.
Yeah,
it's a bad outlap F1 podcast joke. Monkey in his plan. Monkey wrench in the plans.
Yeah, there you go.
There we go. All right, I did that one on purpose. Ha ha. All right, so we'll move into our dark horse of the day. I'll go first with this one. I'm going to give this one to Kevin Magnussen, because again, for another guy who's on the way out, this is how you finish a career. It's great to see Haas being competitive again, doing Haas things. And yeah, I mean, I'm all here for this vibe that Io Koremitsu has brought into that team. I love it, and good on you, Haas. Go get him. Maybe Aston Martin's a long-standing target, but hell, go get him for P5, man. I love it.
I agree. Kevin Magnussen is a good recipient for this award. However, my dark horse is going to go to Pierre Gasly, who made up for the bad that came out of the U.S. Grand Prix weekend for him by coming back here and getting that last point. He had such a good qualifying at Coda, and it was, I don't know if he would have been in the points on pace anyway, but he did have it undone for him pretty early on by a bad pit stop, which kind of leaves a sour taste in your mouth. However, here, things did go his way. He managed to get that point, and opportunities for Alpine to get points this year seem to be few and far between, and he's had opportunities, put himself in a position to have that opportunity. Now 2 races in a row, so really good performance from Gasly.
Yeah, I think both of those are good recipients of our Dark Horse Award right there. All right, so we'll move into our driver of the day. I think we're in unanimity here. Carlos Sainz, just a great drive. Great on it all weekend. This was his weekend. He didn't let it go from the beginning all the way through the end. Thought he was clearly the fastest guy all weekend. So well done, Carlos. And as I said before, if this is the last romp in the victory circle, you did it right, man. Way to go.
Mm-hmm. I would say that I think we're up to 4 career wins now for Carlos Sainz, and I would say out of 3 out of 4, other than that very first one that he got at the British Grand Prix, which was kind of chaotic, I would say that the other 3 wins that he has gotten were very well controlled by him. In Singapore, he held on to the lead under some immense pressure, especially at the end of the race. In Australia, he took the best of the situation when Max retired from the race and pretty much controlled the rest of the race from there to get the win. And then here, performed very, very well in qualifying, got his first pole of the year, and then successfully converted that into a win. And, as you said, controlled pretty much the entire race. I think he only lost the lead maybe briefly during pit sequence, but, other than that, totally in control. And he seems to be the guy who, when he gets in that position to win the race, he's able to stay calm and stay in control and bring it home.
And the only thing I didn't hear him singing. I didn't hear him singing "Smooth Operator" on the radio this time.
No, I gotta imagine maybe he's a little still bittersweet about it. Maybe feeling that this could be the last one for a little while, which is kind of sad. But I'm hoping he's taking it in and enjoying it for what it is.
Yeah, definitely share that sentiment for sure. All right. So before we hop on out for the evening, we do have to talk about predictions. And these were pretty brutal. The only saving grace is we scored points. But Cody, you are relegated to 1 point on the weekend. You did get Lando Norris for P2 on the podium, but that was as far as you progressed. Our prop bet, our bonus picks we were around them. We were close to them. Our podium, you almost would have nailed the podium had you inverted the Ferraris, but sadly not to be there. And my race podium didn't happen. We were kind of close, but not really. And my bonus picks were around them, but not any of them. But I did get the 2 lap times because I was faster. Not that these lap times were even really good, because they were very much quicker than we both anticipated by a couple seconds. But
yeah, I did get the quality time sub 1:16.
Yeah, and I did get the overall fastest lap time, even though none of our drivers or who we predicted to do those times actually came home. So I technically did win the weekend by a scant 2-1. So I guess the smallest of margins.
It counts.
I guess I'll take it. Okay, so if you thought we were over, nothing is over until we decide it is. The Brazilian Grand Prix is up and coming, and boy, we've already got a lot of stories going into it. We've got the Max Lando situation. We've got the constructors' fights up and down the grid, all the way through to P8 in the constructors. It's all to play for. Brazilian Grand Prix always throws something special at it. Do we see weather? A whole lot of stuff to happen. We're going to be here all week covering all the stories and stuff that happened. And we're going to be back with a preview show later on this week. And we'll set the stage for that Brazilian Grand Prix, which is going to come at us thick and fast next weekend. So here we go again. Cody, any final thoughts before we hop on out?
Brazil is a fan favorite. This track has produced many, many excellent races over the years, and I think that this one is going to play very much into the results for both championships. It is a race where you tend to see a lot of weather. There's been a lot of really wet races in Brazil as well, so we'll just have to see how all of that plays together. I am a little bothered by the fact that we're now gonna do this and then get another 3 week break before the triple header to round out the season. These breaks are really weird, man. Like 4 week summer break, that's normal. 4 week second break, that's not normal. And then another 3 week break, like they really gotta, reorganize the second half of the season, in my opinion. But I, one way or the other, I am very excited for the Brazilian Grand Prix.
Yeah, the calendar definitely needs some tweaking. I've got no qualms with that. But yes, sir, you are correct. We go from November 3rd to the 23rd. So that is a 3-week delta between the Brazilian Grand Prix in Vegas. And then you let all these F1 guys spend extra time in Vegas. So Lord only knows what will be gotten up to between now and then. But anyway, we will be here for all of it. This was, like I said, a much more entertaining and much more drama-filled race than I normally would have anticipated. Usually Mexico is a bit of a snoozer, but I'm glad that it wasn't. So for Cody, it's been Andy. We'll catch you for a Brazilian Grand Prix preview. And until then, may all your laps be fast.